In today's edition of Off the Hill, the savage ethnic cleansing of Christians in the Middle East. What's next for these ancient communities on the brink of extinction, and what can you do to help? It's been over 3 years since ISIS began its genocidal reign of terror in northern Iraq and Syria. But even as areas under the terror group's control are being liberated, the region's Christians are still teetering on the brink of annihilation. Here to talk about his recent fact-finding trip to Iraq is Rebel Media's Ezra Levant. While there, Ezra says he saw several analogies to the Holocaust, including the shocking level of ethnic cleansing against Christians. Ezra, can you tell us what you mean?
Sure, this jihad against the Christians is not just a normal war. It's not about territory and money. Of course, it is about those things, but it's mainly about spreading Islam and creating an Islamic state. Most of that region is Muslim already, but there are remnants of an ancient Christian community that dates back more than a millennium and a half. They still pray in Jesus' language of Aramaic. These Christian communities are often in little towns or parts of cities, have been there for almost 2,000 years. And they were a very special target of ISIS, the same way that Germans, when they invaded Europe, yes, it was about money and power and land, but they also had a very special focus on Jews, including those Jewish towns called shtetls. The Nazis made Jews wear a yellow Star of David, and they had a J in their passport for Yud. Same thing. The Islamic State would put the Arabic letter Nun, which is like our N, on the homes of Christians. That stood for Nazarene, as in someone who follows Jesus. So there's so many analogies, and I guess the final one is the ethnic cleansing. The same way millions of Jews were cleansed, were absolutely burnt out of Europe, perhaps forever in some places. That is the Islamic State goal in the Middle East, to totally make the Islamic State and Iraq and Syria and other regions Christian-free. It is a form of an anti-Christian Holocaust. Cutting
to now, people are talking about Christians and other religious minorities in the region being at a tipping point for survival. How accurate is that?
Well, it's completely accurate. Let me give you the example of the town of Tel Asqaf that I visited. It was recently liberated from ISIS. Actually, that town went back and forth. So much of the town is like rubble. It looks a little bit like Stalingrad. It was either blown up by ISIS or in the war to liberate it, including by U.S. air power. So the town is rubble. How many Christians want to go back to that town? We went to a town called Batnaya that was recently liberated. 80%, more than 80% of all the structures in that town are damaged. The church had been torched. All the crosses had been broken. Any icons of Jesus or Mary were used for target practice by ISIS terrorists. They ripped or burned or shot Christian prayer books. This ethnic cleansing is working. The Christian population of Iraq is at a historic low, and I don't honestly blame the Christians who fled. Do you really want to be at perpetual risk of murder, of dislocation, or do you want to say, you know what, let's move to the West? It's heartbreaking to me to see one of the world's longest, oldest, ancient Christian communities either be killed or displaced.
So of the people you spoke to while you were on the ground in these towns that have been destroyed, how many of these people want to stay there and how many want to leave?
Well, I'd say it was 50-50. Of course, that's just anecdotal. I mean, the UN refugee camps are extremely hostile places for Christians. They're dominated, not only are they run by Muslims, but the camp itself is dominated by Muslims, including ISIS supporters. There's these forgotten ones. They're Christian or other minority groups like the Yazidis. They're not welcome. It's not hospitable for them in UN camps. So they're in these sort of forgotten camps.
We hear a bunch of reports about how they're running out of money and running out of medicine and running out of food. How much time is left to keep these people alive, or at least in the region?
Well, the camps we saw are established enough. They have running water, they have air conditioners, because these people have been there in some cases for 2 or more years. So they're not on the brink of starvation, the camps we saw. The trouble is, now that Mosul is being recaptured by the Iraqis, and the West. And now that ISIS is on the run, I'm worried that what little support there is for these forgotten Christians will dry up as the world says, oh, good, well, the threat from ISIS is over, so we don't have to support these refugees anymore. The tragedy, I guess the extra layer of the tragedy is the West has taken millions of refugees, especially Germany and France, but almost none of them are Christian. They took people who were not really refugees. They were military-aged Muslim men who were not really fleeing anything. The irony is the real people at risk, the real lambs here, remain in Iraq and Syria. They remain under threat while the wolves run rampant through the West.
Wow. Thank you for speaking with me, Ezra.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the time to talk about it.
To learn more about how bad the situation is and what Ezra is doing to help, visit SaveTheChristians.com. This has been your Off the Hill Brief. I'm Nate Madden.